last week we took a look at some potential Capcom characters that I thought might be likely if they were indeed going to have a character included in Fighters Pass Volume 2. As many pointed out from last week, due to the fact that they have 3 characters in the base game, it seems unlikely. But I still thought that since they haven't had a DLC character in Ultimate yet, and they have a lot of banger series that are yet to be represented, they very well could have a chance. So, let's segue into what this week's list is. Yes, as you've seen by the title, we're going to cover the top 5 potential Ubisoft characters. Now, this list was a bit of a tricky one to come up with because a lot of Ubisoft characters that are popular have been from a multitude of mature games. Some of their most popular IPs already have Smash representation as either Spirits or Mii costumes, etc. And the fact that they're also an entirely Western third-party developer, and as we know, those generally don't fare well in getting included into Smash Brothers. So again, I'm going to assume, for this top 5 in particular, that being an NPC, especially a spirit in particular, isn't the death knell we all believe it to be. In fact, the Arms Fighter has us all hoping that spirits can be upgraded, but the jury still remains out on that one. But anyway, once again, this list is purely 100% speculation on my part, and with Nintendo news being so infrequent due to the pandemic, the speculation sphere is in need of good quality discussion and imagination to fill the time between the official Smash reveals and announcements. So, without further ado, let's take a look at my top 5 potential characters for the company that I believe has the best chance for giving us our possible one and only Western-created character, Ubisoft. Coming in at number 5, and at the bottom of our list, and believe me, he's there for a reason, is Sam Fisher from Splinter Cell. Now, he's undoubtedly a legacy character from Ubisoft's catalog, and if they made his moveset accurately to the actual Splinter Cell games, he could represent stealth as a genre a lot better than Snake does with his explosives. But they gave Snake a more projectile-based moveset to begin with. So, if Snake isn't getting sneaky knife-slashing moves, and he's the OG Japanese created forefather of the stealth genre, then what chance does Sam have at being represented more accurately? The answer is, he really doesn't, unless of course the stars aligned, and they wanted to give this character archetype another and more accurate go. But let's be honest here, that would mess with that ESRB rating with this game quite a bit if they were going to do that. And again, he could use a pistol or gun for a projectile, but we have a couple of fighters who do that already. And if you incorporate those grenades he uses in Splinter Cell, well then you completely get a Snake clone. So Sam's already been beaten to the punch when it comes to genre representation in Smash, by the very character who made sure that Splinter Cell could exist in the first place. But with all these knocks against him, you're probably wondering why I included him on this list at all. Well, it's because he is one of the most recognized faces of Ubisoft's intellectual properties, and honestly, that counts for something in Smash when it comes to character inclusion. But sadly, that's all the good I can say for him, because there are characters throughout this list that you're going to see coming up that are just as recognizable and would be much better represented in Smash Brothers. So yeah, as you can tell, I was kind of just needing to fill a spot. But Splinter Cell does have its fans, and it has its place in gaming history, and even more importantly, it has its place in Ubisoft's history. But he's at the bottom of this list for a reason, and that glaring reason being that we already have Snake on this roster, who's representing the stealth genre as well as he possibly can, given the fact that he's been included in a family-friendly mascot fighting game. So, let's move on to some better potential candidates, shall we? Coming in at number 4 for our potential Ubisoft fighters is the Prince from Prince of Persia. Now, here's another legacy character from Ubisoft. In fact, they've been behind this series since 2003. And the series actually started way before that, back on some old school computers and such in the late 80s. But we're going to stick with the Ubisoft tenure because that's why we're all here. So most will remember the Prince from the Sands of Time games. This series of Prince of Persia games features the most well-known incarnation of the Prince. In fact, it was popular enough to spawn a feature film based off of it. So how about we get a Jake Gyllenhaal alt in Smash, everyone? Huh? I kid. The Prince would represent the action-adventure game genre, which has a small bit of representation in Smash, but it could always have some more. The Legend of Zelda series being perhaps the most representation we have for this genre overall, even if 3 of them are different links. But nonetheless, it would always be great to get more of this kind of representation in Smash Brothers. Hell, look at how well the Belmonts translated to Smash, for crying out loud. Moveset potential is definitely strong with the Prince. As I mentioned previously, the Prince featured in the Sands of Time series alone can give us a lot of stuff to work with for the Prince's potential inclusion in Smash Brothers. His 6-hit combo would be perfect for a jab, using the Dagger of Time for most of his non-special attacks, but when you add in those special moves, this is where the Prince gets even more interesting. For neutral special, he would use Farah's Bow, which would be quicker than Link's, and as a result would do teeny tiny chip damage at best, but it would be an instant stun, which will help you punish your opponents. Side special would be Dagger's Tail. It would fling from afar, it would have a slingshot effect to anyone who gets caught in its range, and they would then be tossed around when they're at the mercy of it. Up special will be Dust Devil, in which a sandstorm causes the Prince to be flung upwards like any other recovery, and as a result, it would have a vacuum effect to your opponents, much like, say, Hero's Recovery does. And lastly, his down special would be a Time Counter, which is a move similar to Bayonetta's Witch Time, and which is how it would probably function. Now we discuss how likely he really is, and honestly, he's a bit of a forgotten character these days. And as a result, I wouldn't imagine he would be the character Ubisoft would use as their definitive Smash rep. But he has quite a bit of moveset potential, and is a classic character from the Ubisoft catalog. But seriously, a classic character from an action-adventure game that I feel is more likely to get a spot from a different company would be Ryu Hayabusa from Koei Tecmo's Ninja Gaiden series. But we can discuss that at large in another video. All in all, the Prince has moves that would translate perfectly for Smash. Sands of Time is a long-term Ubisoft series, but there are much better characters that are universally well-known more than he is, and as a result, that's why they're higher on this here list. But I felt that giving this Prince a spot for moveset potential alone would give some interesting diversity to this top 5. But we'll move on. Coming in at number 3 for our list of potential Ubisoft characters is the Rabbids from, well, Ubisoft's Raving Rabbids series. These little critters have grown so much in popularity over the last decade alone, having originated from the Rayman series into getting a series that's entirely their own, and even a cartoon show. But an important thing of note here is pretty well every single Rabbid game that's ever been released has been released on a Nintendo platform, with the exception of Raving Rabbids Alive and Kicking, which was developed for the Xbox Kinect on the 360. But other than that, all the other games were ported onto the Wii, the Nintendo DS, the Nintendo 3DS, and even the Wii U. And most recently of all, the Rabbids had an official crossover game with the Mario franchise on the Nintendo Switch. It's almost 3 years old now, but that's still a pretty big deal. The fact that Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is released and playable as a Switch exclusive after already having a few Nintendo exclusive releases in the past, that means the Rabbids themselves might be seen as almost like Nintendo characters rather than characters from a third-party developer. And more importantly, it shows how close the developer and publishing relations are between Nintendo and Ubisoft, which helps my claim that they are, in my opinion, the most likely third-party company to get us a Western character from. Now we move on to moveset potential, and these critters certainly have a ton of that. First off, they could be another character that falls under the tag team / puppeteer archetype, where you control a duo or trio of Rabbids on screen, in a similar vein to Ice Climbers and Rosalina and Luma, who to this day remain the only characters of this archetype in Smash. So it would certainly be a welcome addition for that aspect alone. Your neutral B could be wacky as hell, as you could shoot from a multitude of weapons that were featured in the Mario crossover. And perhaps there could be a couple weapons chosen for this field, and they're always random and changing order whenever you hold down the B button. Side special would be that wacky shopping cart that they use in their games, and I imagine that it would work similarly to Wario's motorcycle or the Koopaling's charging clown cart. Their up special could have a very significant gimmick besides just recovery, in which you could spawn another Rabbid as you recover upward. But by doing so, it'll keep another Rabbid in your pack. So, as your trio takes damage over time, like Luma or the Pikmin do in Smash already, they'll be battered completely off the battlefield. They'll die, essentially. So by performing up special, you will spawn another Rabbid to take its place. If all of your Rabbids remain intact, then imagine they use each other to propel upwards like in a ladder formation. To grab the ledge, they just stack on top of each other like a ladder. But if you are a Rabbid short, you can summon a new one to take its place and make it back to stage, as that one will come up and help your ladder position, and you'll go back to full strength at 3 Rabbids apiece. Which is pretty unique, and it would maybe be the most crazy and unique up special in the game if they ever did that. But lastly, let's go to the down special. And boy oh boy, it's another time-based move from Ubisoft's canon. Down special is going to be time travel. So, much like a counter, if you time this here move right, a little washing machine is going to go and appear, and it's going to be haywire. It's going to create a time loop that will force an opponent back into a position which they will be punished for being put in. So it's going to put your opponent in a bad spot that they don't want to be in. It's going to get them hit. Basically, it's going to slow them down or make them go backwards. Any way in which you can punish them, it's going to put them in a bad spot. And again, it may be Bayonetta-like, in which it's similar to Witch Time. But hey, she doesn't have a wacky time machine that's comprised of an old washing machine. That makes it more cool, right? So the Nintendo history is there in spades. They have a unique archetype that hasn't been done much at all in Smash, and their moveset potential, I think, is certainly off the charts. So why are they stuck at 3, rather than at the absolute top of my list? Well, allow me to explain then. They've already been featured in Ultimate as downloadable, purchasable Mii costumes. And I'm going to assume that that spells much more doom than being a spirit, because you have to pay for said costume. This wasn't just an option in the base game. So if Ubisoft and Nintendo agreed for this to be how the Rabbids were featured in Smash, then I really don't see them becoming a playable trio in spite of all this. But we all can't deny that perhaps more than any other character on this list, the Rabbids have the most history with Nintendo and have tons of moveset potential that Sakurai would surely love to work with. And coming in at number 2 for our list of potential Ubisoft characters is none other than Ezio from the Assassin's Creed series. You cannot argue at all that Assassin's Creed is one of Ubisoft's biggest juggernauts. It's been around since 2007 with a ton of sequels that have not only sold well, but have been critically acclaimed at the same time. But I know how full well it hasn't been on many Nintendo consoles all that much, particularly the very popular games at the start of the series, which includes Assassin's Creed 2, in which is the game that Ezio is the main protagonist of. But as we know, that doesn't always disqualify a character. Snake, Cloud, and Joker can all make the claim that the game that brought them to the dance as characters and made them famous were never really on a Nintendo platform before their inclusion in Smash Bros. And as of recent years, the newer Assassin's Creed games have been ported to the Wii U and Nintendo Switch, even if they have all taken place after the Desmond Miles and his related ancestors saga, Ezio, of course, being one of, and potentially the most well-known, of Mr. Miles' ancestors. So now let's go over Ezio's moveset potential. Neutral special would be Hidden Gun. This is a unique weapon in Assassin's Creed that would fire a projectile, and it's a gun band of sorts that straps to Ezio's arm and is covered by the sleeves of his cloak. Side special would be Smoke Bomb, where Ezio throws one down, and from it bursts some poisonous smoke that would damage those who get caught in it. Up special would be the flying machine, where you use a Da Vinci-style flying apparatus to make your recovery back to stage. And lastly, down special would be likely to be Eagle Vision, which, again, I won't lie, it functions like a counter, because even in Assassin's Creed, it is a counter move. Overall, I don't think he would be as creative as the Rabbids, but he has enough unique tools to make him stand out amongst the Smash cast. And he certainly is a big enough name from Ubisoft, in which his inclusion would not only turn some heads and raise some eyebrows, but he could also maybe convert an Assassin's Creed fan to potentially trying out Smash Ultimate, which would certainly be a win-win for both Nintendo and Ubisoft as a whole. But how likely is he really? Well, I'm kind of torn on this, but I think he has decently realistic chances of Ubisoft choosing him to be their definitive rep for Smash. But like the Rabbids, there is a Mii costume that's been released via DLC for Altair, who is the playable ancestor of Desmond Miles in the very first Assassin's Creed game, and it was released alongside Byleth and the Rabbids Mii costume. Again, I could spin it this way, that they didn't make a Mii costume particularly for Ezio, so therefore it means he has a chance, which I think is true to an extent. The Mii costume is only of Altair, and as I said, I think Ezio is the most well-known playable ancestor of the Desmond Miles saga. However, there is still one final character I believe to be the most appropriate for Smash, as well as I think this character is seen as the official flagship character of the Ubisoft brand overall, even more than Ezio is seen as this. So now, we have come to this, the number one spot, and in my opinion, the most likely Ubisoft character for Smash DLC is, and drum roll, Rayman. A classic platforming character from the 90s, you say? Usually that means you happen to be a perfect fit for Smash. Am I right, Sonic? How about you, Yoshi? Diddy Kong, you here? Kirby? Oh yeah? Banjo and Kazooie? You're all here? Oh, right, because the list goes on and on. These characters usually fit into Smash just perfectly, and generally, when they come from a third-party company, they're usually seen as the company's mascot character, like Sonic is for Sega, or Banjo and Kazooie for Rare. Rayman would fit this bill perfectly for Ubisoft, and as a result, this inclusion would show how close Ubisoft and Nintendo are these days. And even before that, with all the publications and releases on Nintendo consoles, the relationship between these two companies is why I believe Rayman is the most likely Western-created character from a third party, if we even get one at all in this second Fighter's Pass. So let's take a look at moveset potential, and believe me, there's a ton. Rayman has floating limbs, which is a style of character that is still untapped in being playable in Smash thus far. We have Sukapan, but he's only an assist trophy, not playable. So there's a ton of potential there as far as I'm concerned. And there are a ton of things you can take from the key Rayman titles to build a moveset from. So let's discuss his potential special moves, because I think the basic attacks that are used from the A button are pretty damn straightforward, and you all could probably imagine what they're like. But we'll start with his special moves and kind of focus on them a bit. So his neutral special would be his telescopic fist. Hold it and charge it, and when you release it, you can fling that floaty fist forward and hit an opponent from afar. Now that I've said all that, it seems very much like what the Arms fighter is going to be able to do, just minus a floating arm for an arm that's attached to a person. But yeah, level with me. It was the best I could come up with. Believe me, it's just going to get better from here. His side special could be Walking Shell, which in Rayman 2, The Great Escape, which was the first Rayman game to be released on a Nintendo console, by the way, and more on that later, was basically a rocket with legs which could run through a bunch of enemies and shit. So in Smash, it could be chargeable and dash through things, a la Wonder Wing or Bowser Jr.'s Clown Cart Dash. His up special would be very obviously be the Super Helicopter, in which Rayman's wacky hair flaps around like a propeller, and lifts him off the ground into the air, like any good recovery should. And lastly, his down special would be a plum drop. So in Rayman 3 and even in Rayman 2, you could pick up plums and throw them to get that sweet, sweet plum juice. So in Smash, you could just pick the thing out of the ground and hurl it at an opponent. Death by plums. Please, Nintendo, make this happen. So how has Rayman's history fared with Nintendo? Well, it's fared absolutely fantastically. The only Rayman game that wasn't released on a Nintendo platform, funnily enough, was the very first one. Every main series game from then on, since Rayman 2, has been released on a Nintendo console. So much like the Rabbids earlier in this list, Rayman hasn't been a ghost to Nintendo at all. And that kind of heritage is always considered when selecting a big guest character for Smash when they come from a third-party company. Yes, I will now address the elephant in the room. As of this recording right now, Rayman is in the game as a spirit. And also, as of this recording, we don't know if that truly disconfirms a character entirely from future DLC inclusion. Admittedly, I think there's a chance a few of these characters in this position as spirits may get upgraded during the second Fighter's Pass, but it's still very much wait and see and 100% speculatory. But since the Rayman spirit is based off Rayman Legends and Origins, in which it's this illustrated 2D render of the character, I imagine in Smash we'll get a fully developed 3D render of Rayman, which will be 100% Smashified and look different to the spirit that's already included. Again, I'm definitely grasping at straws here to an extent, but I've got to make some sort of justification for Rayman's potential upgrade, from spirit status. What else am I going to say, right? So there you have it, my list of the 5 potential Ubisoft characters that could be included in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as DLC. The first 2, I'll admit, are very, very far-fetched, but I do truly think the top 3 stand a substantial chance, despite the NPC shenanigans they're all under right now. And I remain firm in my belief that if, and I can't stress this enough, that's a big if we get a Western third-party character, I truly believe it's going to be from Ubisoft. I'm now going to toss a little sneak peek your guys' way for next week. Next week's top 5 list is going to look at potential characters from Bandai Namco. The company that's been lending a helping hand in the current DLC cycle, the original creation of the base game, and even helped with Smash way back in the Wii U and 3DS days. That company? So prepare for that list, folks. And now, I throw the following questions to you guys. Do you agree with the Ubisoft candidates that I had in this video? If not, explain who I might have missed and how their chances rate. And lastly, do you agree on my stance that Ubisoft will be the company to rep our potential only Western created character? Let me know all of your thoughts in those comments below. Now we begin the absolute cheapest of plugs. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the video again, meaning the end. As you can see by the lovely graphic in front of you, there is a list to all of my social media and gaming presences. So please add and follow me on all of those platforms to stay as up to date with all of my content as you can going forward. And for those of you who are new to the channel and enjoyed what you've seen and heard, please click on that lovely little subscribe button, and thank you all so very much for watching.